Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This poem, Lights Out, is written by British poet Edward Thomas. Edward Thomas too is an early modernist writer. He is also known as a war poet. He died in 1917 in First World War. And as we read this poem, Lights Out, before we start reading this poem, I would like you to keep in your minds the two poems we have studied earlier. First poem is One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. And the second poem is That Sonnet by John Keats, romantic poet. When I Have Fears. These two poems you need to keep in your minds, because in the poem that we are studying right now, Lights Out, evokes some of the themes that have been touched upon by the two writers in the two poems I have mentioned, One Art and When I Have Fears. So as I read the poem, you have to keep in mind the other two poems as well, so that you can see the connections and you can grasp the ideas better. Lights Out by Edward Thomas. I have come to the borders of sleep, the unfathomable deep, forest where all must lose their way, however straight or winding, soon or late, they cannot choose. So there is a sense of finality in the closing verse of the first stanza. They cannot choose. Lights Out, the title means that the lights are out, which means the time to sleep, the time to go to bed. And the first line, the first verse of the poem reaffirms the idea in the title, Lights Out, that it's the time to sleep. I have come to the borders of sleep. Borders of sleep, borders is a word that evokes a kind of an area, a territory, a terrain, or a domain where there are boundaries. And the poet says that he now stands on the borders of sleep. That means he is about to fall asleep. So you must notice that the poem opens with a metaphor. The poem evokes an image of sleep, which is compared with a territory, the unfathomable deep. Unfathomable means immeasurable. Fathom means measure. Unfathomable, which cannot be measured. So the area, the territory is so deep, there's so much depth that it cannot be measured. Forest where all must lose. And then in the third verse, the image of a forest has been presented. Forest or woods has been used. The metaphor of forest has been used to vividly portray the idea of sleep. Forest where all must lose their way. So forest, is different from the urban areas, from the cities, from the villages, where there are the roads and there are the pathways which clearly state the directions. Everybody knows the path. But in the forest, when you compare a forest with a city or even a village, there is the whole territory, the whole area is uncharted. There are no clear directions where the forest will lead, where the different paths in the forest will lead. In fact, there are no paths, and one has to navigate one's way very carefully in a forest. As well as in this poem, the forest suggests that it's a place where all must lose their way. So it's a place where people are bound to lose their way. They are not going to follow a clear direction and go somewhere that they want to arrive at. It's something, this forest is the sleep, that through sleep the travelers, the imagery of a journey, the metaphor of a journey, the metaphor of a traveler, the metaphor of journey and traveler have been used. These two metaphors have been used to suggest evoke or portray the experience of sleep for human beings. However straight, so it says all must lose their way, however straight or winding. Winding means zigzag. So people, whoever enter the territory of sleep, whether they follow the straight path or they go through the zigzag path, the winding path, soon or late, they cannot choose. So they have to fall asleep and they cannot choose which path they are going to follow sleep. Many a road track that since the dawn's first crack up to the forest brink. There may be some road tracks that since the dawn's first crack, since early morning up to the forest brink. So early morning to the journey is traced to the forest brink. Brink means edge. Again the imagery of borders of sleep. And these borders of sleep have been evoked through the image of a forest. And on the brink means on the edge of the forest, on the border of the forest, deceived the travelers. So many road tracks have deceived the travelers. People consider travelers, who are the travelers? Human beings. So human beings compared to travelers who are navigating their path in the forest. Which is this forest? This is not the ordinary forest. This is the forest of sleep, where the travelers lose their tracks, where no matter how hard they try to navigate to keep their consciousness, they have to lose their consciousness. Suddenly now blurs. So all those road tracks that they carry with them to travel in the forest are of no use, because the path becomes blurred. Blurred means unclear as they go to sleep, as they lose consciousness, and in they sink. And the travelers sink in the sink, you see, is a word that is suggestive of water, of vast ocean. So sink is just one word which evokes the whole image of ocean. First there is the image of forest, next there is the image of ocean. Sleep is first compared with forest, where the travelers lose their path. Travelers are the human beings who are on the journey of life, or on their journey from day to night, and once that it is time to sleep, they cannot escape sleep. It's not in their power to avoid sleep. It's unavoidable. And these two images, students, you have to focus and remember the image of a forest and the image of a vast ocean where the travelers sink in. Here love ends, despair, ambition ends. These verses remind me of that poem, that sonnet by John Keats, When I Have Fears. In that poem also, that the poet says that everything is temporary. Love, ambition, beauty, everything is temporary. And in this poem, at this point, lights out again, Edward Thomas. He says, here love ends. Here where? On the borders of sleep, on the brink of this forest which he calls sleep. Everything loses its value. Everything, love, despair. Despair means disappointment, disillusionment, ambition, desire, all pleasure and all trouble. Although most sweet or bitter, here ends in sleep, that is sweeter than tasks most noble. So in sleep one loses consciousness of all one's desires, hopes, fears, ambitions, pleasures, troubles, difficulties, bitter or sweet memories. Everything ends in sleep, because sleep is sweeter than tasks most noble. So when there is time to sleep, the noblest of tasks are forgotten by the people and they fall asleep. There is not any book or face of dearest look. Face of dearest look means somebody you love, the beloved person, the beloved face. So once it's time to sleep, it's time to lose one's consciousness through sleep, then no book, how much you may be interested in that book, it could be your favorite book, it could be your favorite company, it could be your favorite friend, no one or no book can hold attention of someone who is falling asleep, that I would not turn from now to go into the unknown. I must enter and leave alone, I know not how. So this is the unknown territory. The unknown territory is that of sleep, that he must enter, that is unavoidable, that is inescapable. Sleep is an experience which is inescapable, and the writer says that he has to leave everything alone and enter into the territory of sleep. The tall forest towers. This is the closing stanza, and in this closing stanza you will notice the use of opposites. The tall forest towers, its cloudy foliage lowers. Towers and lowers. Here you see the use of rhyming verses, creating alliteration that creates music, as well as it highlights the combination, the coexistence of the opposites in sleep. Tall forest towers means that these are the forests. Because it is a forest, so there are tall trees. It's cloudy foliage. Foliage means leaves. There are the leaves that are so thick. This is a thick forest. This is perhaps an ancient forest, because sleep is an ancient human ritual. It's second nature. It's instinctive. Going to sleep is in human instinct, basic fundamental human need. So he says that in the forest of sleep there are tall trees and there are thick foliage. Foliage means leaves, like clouds, and they are lowering. As the clouds are lowering, the person is sleeping deeply. Ahead, shelf above shelf. These are the shelves of the trees, the branches of the trees forming the shelf above shelf. It's silence I hear and obey. And there are again the opposites. How can you hear the silence? Silence cannot be heard. Like the tall towering trees and their foliage means leaves lowering. These are the two opposites, and next two opposites are silence that the poet can hear. It's silence I hear and obey, that I may lose my way and myself. It's a paradox that the poet has used. The silence of sleep, everyone has to hear and follow. Obey means follow. The paradox of sleep is that is the silence. It's the message. Sleep brings the message of silence, and everyone has to obey the message, that I may lose my way and myself. So here I was in the closing verses, I am reminded of One Art by Elizabeth Bishop, that we have to lose one art, that is the art of losing things, isn't hard to master, because every day human beings are bound to lose things, whether they like it or not. Things do get lost. So in sleep, human beings have to lose. He says, I may lose my way and myself. So my way means all the intentions, plans, programs in the human mind. Everything is lost, and human beings have to lose themselves to sleep. That is the power of sleep. So this is the first surface, also called literal meaning of the poem, that the poem employs metaphors such as forest, such as the word sink evokes the image of water or ocean or a river maybe. Then the metaphor of a journey has been employed. Human beings are compared with travelers who are on their journey. They come on the borders of sleep, and once they are on the borders of sleep, there is no book, no favorite book, no favorite friend, or ambition, or disappointment, or trouble, or bitter or sweet memories. Nothing can hold the attention of someone who is now bound to sleep, who wants to sleep and who is falling asleep. So apparently the poem is lights out, means the time to sleep. This is the first literal meaning of the poem. But being literature students, you have to go you have to delve deep and grasp the deeper meanings. And the second meaning could be sleep is, Shakespeare calls sleep as counterfeit death. sleep is also compared with death. That sleep is almost like death, and every time we rise from sleep, that's a new life, that's a new day. So if you compare sleep with death, then you can, I would like to quote most famous verses by Robert Frost. Robert Frost, you see, is an American poet, famous American poet, and his famous verses are, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep." In this poem also, Robert Frost has drawn the parallel between sleep and woods. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, and miles to go before I sleep. So he has again drawn the parallel between woods and sleep, that in the feelings, sleep is a feeling, sleep is a physical experience, is a bodily need, and the poet has compared sleep with woods. Robert Frost does that in his famous poem Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. This is the title of the poem written by Robert Frost, and I have used this poem to compare it with Lights Out. So you see, girls, today we have studied Lights Out, one poem, and in the discussion of this one poem, I have used 3 more poems. One Art by Elizabeth Bishop, When I Have Fears by John Keats, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. So these are the 3 poems that we have discussed. I have shared the questions with you, and I would appreciate, girls, if you have any questions. You can ask your questions now. One more comparison that the writer has used, one more important theme that the writer has evoked in this poem, that is the theme of death as a leveler, or sleep as an equalizing factor. Equal, that in the eyes of sleep, everyone is equal. Whether someone is rich or poor, good or evil, young or old, everyone is equal in the eyes of sleep, when it comes to sleep. Likewise, death is also called a great leveler. I have written this question in the list of questions. How is death a great leveler? How does sleep compare with death? So death is also a great leveler. Level means equal in the eyes of death. Death is inescapable both for rich and poor, good and evil, young or old. So like death, sleep is also an overpowering and overwhelming phenomenon of nature from which there is no escape, no avoidance. The poet in this poem has evoked the message of an unconditional surrender to the deep unconscious self, to the unknown. That is the message in the poem, and that is the message you have read in One Art. You have read the same message in the poem written by Elizabeth Sewall की वो poem थी ना, The Bony Arms of Reality, New Year Resolutions. There was another poem, Woman Work. There is this sonnet, When I Have Fears. In all these poems, the writers are offering the message of surrender, acceptance, resignation. So these are the themes, the message of resignation, unconditional surrender to the power of sleep in this poem, and to the cycle of nature in the other poems. When I Have Fears, that life is temporary, human ambition, love, beauty, even troubles, everything is temporary. Therefore, there should be an acceptance. Acceptance is the wisdom that everyone needs to learn. Acceptance of life as it comes to you, with all its beauty, joys, as well as the challenges, the difficulties, the low moments. Everything is to be accepted and in fact celebrated. The moments of grief, the moments of sorrow are as valuable as the moments of joy, achievement, and success. That is the wisdom that each piece of literature teaches us. Let it be a poem or a short story or a play or an essay. This is the wisdom that each piece of literature and each poem tries to inculcate in the readers, the wisdom of being open to life, being accepting of both the rise and the fall, the joy and the sorrow, the gain and the loss. That are the parts of life. And the poets, the writers, these wise people, these poets are the wise people. They incorporate their wisdom in their poems. And all these poems convey these messages to us: the message of truthfulness. All these poems define what is the true meaning of love. Love, where there is truth, there is love. And where there is no truth or half truth, there is no love. That's the message each poem teaches us. And the complete truth means accepting both sides of the picture, the happy side as well as the sorrowful side of life. When human beings accept both sides of life, then they become wise, they become happy, and they become flexible. Flexible means genuine, authentic. So this is the message. So the writer says that death is inevitable, and modern man, or you may say that humans in the modern age have forgotten the temporary quality of life and the temporary quality of body. That human body is temporary. Human soul is immortal. Human soul is permanent. So the image of dance in the first poem, Leisure, is a metaphor, is a symbol of the harmony and balance between body and soul. So all these materialistic pursuits, which are there for the purpose of physical comforts, for the physical pleasures, and those materialistic pursuits where people sacrifice their values of truth, their values of honesty, their values of integrity. Honesty, integrity, transparency, sincerity, truthfulness, these are the qualities which satisfy the soul, which strengthens the soul, in fact. So when people don't worry about the soul and starve the soul, and they go for half truths, and they don't worry about having differences or having gap between their words and actions, perfect appearances and insincere thoughts or insincere intentions. When people don't care about these gaps, and they act hypocritically, that is the problem that brings stress and brings lack of joy, lack of love for the modern existence, in the modern existence.